So today we're going to talk about the cloud. And as I'm very fond of pointing out, there is no cloud. There's just computers you don't own. That means that they are the same as the computers you do own in terms of security, in terms of the things you have to prepare for to ensure that you are kept safe. But cloud services have become the new critical infrastructure. I can't think of any client that's not using any cloud services. That doesn't make you safer. It simply means that it's somebody else's equipment. Cloud computing continues to change the technology landscape, but cloud security is still just security. So develop a cloud adoption plan that includes cloud security best practices before migrating from on-premise equipment to network services and cloud environments.
And as we'll talk about more in this webinar, there's a shared responsibility for the security now. In a lot of ways, much of this becomes opaque if you're using software as a service versus like a platform as a service. So depending on how you're using the cloud, if you actually have direct access to VMs, it's going to be a lot more like on-prem security in a lot of ways, maybe with security groups and role-based access through AWS, for example, if you're using AWS Cloud. So depending on your cloud architecture, if you're using software as a service and you're subscribing to particular subscriptions, a lot of that is done for you, in air quotes. Understand what is done for you and understand what your responsibility is, because at the end of the day, it's your data. And depending on what we're talking about with regard to cloud services, it's going to be different.
So on that note, what we see as we look at the field is that the growth in revenue for cloud services is tremendous. Now, let me say that graph on the right is a little bit deceptive, or at least a little bit hard to read, in that is the change year over year. So it's still growing. It's growing consistently at the $30 billion level, but cloud is just shooting up. And when we talk about billions of dollars, a lot of people know that I have a former career as a political organizer. It takes some perspective to think in billions. Billions are a lot of money. If you want to count to 1,000, you can do the math. It would take you about 16 minutes. If you want to count to 1 million, it would take you about 11 days. If you want to count to 1 billion, it would take 31.7 years. And if you want to count to 1 trillion, well, that's longer than humanity has been around. It's longer in recorded history. So when we start talking, if you look at these at $917 billion in cloud infrastructure revenue last year, or I'm sorry, by 2025,
yeah,
we're talking about a huge amount of money. Cloud security, so the cloud computing market will be worth $1.5 trillion in 2023. And most of us already have at least some portion of our data in the cloud. But cloud security is cited as a top concern by 75% of organizations. And 60%, give or take, of all ransomware that encrypted data in the cloud, that data was stored in a public cloud, which is to say, let's talk for a moment about the distinction between a public cloud and private cloud. Private cloud is, and this was the way it was in the bad old days, you brought your own server, you hosted it at some hosting farm, but it was your server and you did all the management on it. Public cloud is more like Google Docs, Microsoft OneDrive, or SharePoint, Dropbox, where the data is all on somebody else's machine. You don't have control of it. So 60% was in a public cloud and you didn't have control over it. Moreover, 88% of cloud breaches are caused by human error. We make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. But when it's a cloud location, it's very easy for that mistake to get exploited because it's available to anyone.
And that high number should come as no surprise to folks who are used to working, IT folks especially, who are used to working with cloud infrastructure. It can get quite complex. especially if you're using Azure or AWS. They have very fine-tuned granular control, but if you don't, there's 1,000 ways to do security with all the fine-tuned control you get. And they're working on products to simplify this. AWS just came out with, I think it's called Cedar, which is supposed to be a new way to do role-based access in the cloud. But it's quite complex and it's easy to misconfigure it. Even the best of us can. So, and that's why this number is so high. It's a difficult problem and we're all trying to solve it.